Thank you for staying with us on the AM show. After sharing my blunt thoughts, well, we go blunt a bit when we talk about the sporting sector in our country. This week, we've spoken about agric, we've spoken about education, we've spoken about governance and corruption-related matters. We've touched on education. How about today we look at sports? It's also one crucial aspect of our national life. It brings pride and joy to us, especially in the areas of football, boxing, but other areas as well that we've now targeted. Tennis, swimming, all those ones, ping pong, table tennis. But what exactly should be the direction in the year 2023? Joining us for a conversation on the sporting sector, we have Charles Osei Esibe. He is Vice President, Ghana Athletics Association and President of the Ghana and Africa Arm Wrestling Federation. We also have Muftau Nabila Abdullahi, my own colleague with Joy Sports, joining the conversation. Mr. Esibe, a very good morning to you. Thank you for joining the conversation. And Muftau as well, good morning to you.
My pleasure to be here.
Do we have Muftau, Nabila? I see you, Muftau. When it's possible, just say hi. Please unmute, Muftau, if you can hear me. And Happy New Year to you. All right. So let me start with Mr. Esibe on this all-important subject. In terms of 2022, when you look at sports and all the... Do I hear Muftau? All right. So I'll start with Mr. Esibe. In all the different spheres, in all the different spheres of our sporting sector, from football to boxing and to everything else. We had the Olympics, you saw our performance, we went to the World Cup, among others. What for you was the result or the harvest that we reaped in terms of sports? How would you, in a minute or two, assess the sporting sector and how Ghana fared in 2022?
Well, thank you very much. A moment ago, you were talking about the fact that until we change the way we do things, we won't be able to get the best of results. I think it cuts across all spheres of life, whether you do sports, whether you're into economics, anything you do. Generally, 2022 wasn't bad, but I felt that it was a year that we could have done better. If you check the way we performed generally, I mean, from where I sit, again, as the General Secretary of the Sports Writers Association of Ghana, I oversee a number of sporting disciplines, apart from the federations I represent. Generally, I don't think it was bad, but the major problem has been preparation and lack of resources. We don't invest so much into our sport, so we don't get the best of results. The best sporting discipline for me I saw in the year under review was athletics. Athletics I tip as number one because even before we went to the Commonwealth Games, Azamati, Joe Paul and the rest were, the guys who were flying high the flag for Ghana. So the two of them did well. Deborah Akwa also did well, and then Abigail Kwati also joined. Later in the year, amateur boxing did us proud when they went to the Commonwealth Games. Aside that, a number of the federations, rugby tries to do some activities, tennis, for instance, hosted.
And rugby is an area where we've been growing in our zone and all of that. I know some of these players and the work of, I just forget his name, the former chief executive of Kotoko, Herbert Mensah. Yes.
He's been doing some wonderful work. Badminton led by Evans, also doing great. Like I mentioned, tennis, table tennis, by Mauko, Taekwondo, by Paul Otulate, and the rest. Arm wrestling, for instance, worked so hard. And that's how I became the president for the Africa Confederation and the vice president of the world. So generally, it hasn't been so bad. But we handle sports as if the sporting federation or management of the sport is the property of federation heads. It is not good. I think we must change the way we do things. But generally, if you ask me, 2022, sports wasn't bad. And remember, we went to the World Cup. At some point, I had mixed feelings about our qualifications. I didn't want us to qualify because I felt that it would be a waste of money. At some point, I wanted us to qualify because I felt that we had a youthful team and they needed that platform to prepare for the future. And indeed, we saw what they did at the World Cup. But for some poor management, the team would have performed more than expectation. So it's about attitude, and we must change our attitude. Look, I've said that sports is business. And for people who support sports, it is no more sponsorship, it is investment. All of us must have a national orientation. Bro, from the leadership, from the presidency to the least, we must have a national orientation and understand that sports is business. Sports can be equal to any other sector of the economy. Remember that sports is the only product that interconnects the other sector of the economy. So you find athletes, somebody like Odate Lamte, for all the money he made from football, he's invested in education. He's invested in agri. As Amojan said, why can't we do same? Now, all these athletes have signed up investing their money either into entertainment or education. The athletes have a lawyer, they have doctors, they have artisans who put up their structures for them. So sports is huge. This simple picture, let us do a research and look at the net worth of Serena Williams. Let us do a research and look at the net worth of Usain Bolt. I've always said that once we are able to get this picture, then the national orientation will change. It will come from the top to down, the presidency to the least, the parents and everybody involved in sports. So if you ask me again, 2022 was good. We could have done better. What matters most is for attitude and an attitudinal change.
You speak of an attitudinal change. So I just want you to be a little more specific. What were our key gains and what were our key losses? For example, you speak about the Black Stars. You perhaps wouldn't have wanted us to go because we have such a youthful team, and maybe you felt it would be whitewashed, but we have built something. It's something we can build on, we can progress from. What were our key losses and gains? And again, you spoke about the fact that we could have done more, but for some poor management. Can you be a little more specific in these two areas?
So, boxing, for instance, we went into the Commonwealth Games, and at some point, we're told that two of our athletes were sick, and for that reason, they couldn't fight in the finals. I mean, this is unacceptable. We had a medical team. What kind of checks did we do on these athletes before they left Ghana? Even apart from that, I mean, what kind of preparation did we go through? So when you want to prepare for international competition, preparation includes dieting, preparation includes medication, preparation includes training proper. How did we do all these things for us to get to that stage where we're told that the athlete or the boxer was sick, and for that reason, he couldn't compete in the finals? Look at what happened to our relay team. I mean, I'm part of the Ghana Athletics Association, and I feel sad that this happened. But I am saying that these were errors we could have avoided. These are things we have preached over and over again. Who is noting them down? Who is taking action on these things? Now, boxers, the amateur boxers, for instance, there were a couple of times that they needed support to play international friendlies or to play in competitions in preparation for the Commonwealth Games. Athletics say, now normally what do happen is that the more you compete, the more experience you gain. So we must have a budget. We must register our athletes, whether boxers, whether table tennis players, whether tennis players. We must have a structure and a budget. Once you have that structure and a budget and you play to it, you will reap. Go to Winnipeg. We used to have, in fact, we do have a sports college. We do have a tennis court there. What do we use these facilities for? Look at the Azuma Nelson complex. For years, we have been renovating with our mouths. I'm sorry, but we are not a serious nation. What is important is that all of us must know that sports is lucrative. I've said this severally. Sports is lucrative. If we learn how to manage or create content and manage them, if we learn how to put the sports products together, people like Joy TV, institutions like Joy TV will partner, and then we all share the benefits. We must learn packaging. We must learn how to prepare the athletes and manage them to become top-level performers. It's a general problem.
Right.
It's a general problem. And we must change. And normally, we wait for 2-3 months to major competitions before we begin to discuss how we are going to get there. Even kitchen, where elsewhere, people prepare 6, 8, 12 years ahead of major tournaments and major events. We have no planning, and we have the best brains in this country. Unfortunately, we're lazy in planning. And I think we must get leaders who understand that, look, sports will take a lot of young men from the street. Bro, look at the guys who rob with motorbike. One of the most lucrative sports in the world is motor racing. Why don't we get smart to bring all these guys into motor racing instead of encouraging them to rob? They rob with motorbikes. Why don't we introduce motor racing? So we must have a plan.
When you talk of motor racing, though, I mean these not Formula One, but these racing, the MotoGP and others that are carried out across the world, they come with a certain level of infrastructure. They come with a certain level of investment. I mean, you don't just get up and do it. And why I'm bringing that up, we're also complaining about investment. We're also complaining about investment in boxing, which in itself has not been what it should be in even football, not at the national level, because we've seen the investment, but at the coach level, for example. Many years back in the 90s, we were feeding on the coach system right from the junior leagues and all of that. All of that has fizzled out. So people will also counter and tell you that we can expend that money in other priority areas, in boxing and in football, where we also need funding.
Well, I disagree. Football has been given that support the nation or the federation deserves. What we must do at some point is to autopilot football, because it already has a traffic for sponsorship. It has the eyes already. So people run to football to support them. The little national resources should be pushed into disciplines like athletics, arm wrestling, boxing, and all that, so that they can also grow. Because football has become our number one sporting discipline. You mentioned the coach football. I am particularly happy with what the current FA leadership is doing. I see them trying to bring back coach football. I see them trying to bring back the women's game. But coach football was affected by the introduction of the academies. And whoever says that the academies haven't helped, maybe doesn't understand the game. We just have to manage it well. But for everything we need to do, if we do not invest, we cannot expect any results. If you want to reap, you must sow. From athletics to swimming, we must put in money. Look, is it not interesting that we are surrounded by water? Unfortunately, we don't have quality swimmers in this country. Sometimes you look at your comparative advantage and then you play to the sport. If you go to Mali, it's arm wrestling and football primarily. If we come to Ghana, we should be able to identify our top 10 or top 15 disciplines and begin to invest in them. Again, it is not just about government. I have said that we must put together an engagement or a forum to let people understand that sports is business. Assuming that you are the manager of Usain Bolt, and Usain Bolt is net worth over $200 million, and yours is just about 20 or 15%. Can you imagine how much is coming to you? These are the numbers we should put together. Just assume that you are the manager or the agent for Serena Williams, considering the appearance fee she takes, considering the winning bonuses and all she takes. If you invest in such a talent, enormous physical cash comes to you. If you are an institution, or let's say a company, and you have an association with these athletes as brand ambassadors or as product ambassadors, it pushes your business. So we must let people understand that it is not just about government. I like what Snit has done with the Emporium. Unfortunately, they didn't do a lot of consultation. But currently, it is the only sporting facility we have. And pressure has moved to the Emporium. We are planning Africa Games. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to come up to speed with the infrastructure, that we're trying to put up for the Games. As a country, it was good when we decided to host the Africa Games. I was happy because we're going to put up structures, infrastructure that will later become beneficial to the local federations or the home-based federations. Unfortunately, we don't know where we're going. But I am confident that if we're able to host the Africa Games, beyond the Africa Games, 5, 6, 7 years, Ghana sports will be on a high pedestal. Ghana sports will take Ghana map or Ghana flag to the plan is that any Ghanaian athlete who performs within the Africa Games will move to become a high-performing athlete in the next 4 or 6 years. So I'm happy we're going to host the Africa Games. But, bro, we must have a quality sports policy. We must have quality sports managers. I mean, the Ministry of Youth and Sports, the National Sports Authority, for instance. One thing I have told them severally is that the people we find leading federations, the over 48 or 55 federations today, a number of them, apologies, are not professionals. Some are there by virtue of the fact that they have played the sport before. Some are there by virtue of the fact that they have some interest for the sport. But it is important that we build the capacity of these federation heads so that we all can understand what marketing is.
Right.
So that we all can understand what packaging, creating content is. So we can come to Joy and say that, look, I have athletics event with a tertiary institution. And you know how big it is if Busa is organizing athletics event. And I'm sure Joy TV would want to take advantage of that. So I would even say that I'm going to look for sponsorship. So we share. So capacity building is key. If the federations are not resourceful to do it, I feel that as government, from the National Sports Authority and the ministry, we shouldn't just be endorsing memos. We should push this agenda so that sports becomes a big thing. If you go to North Africa today, when it comes to facilities, they are uncomparable. You can compare. And even when it comes to leadership of continental federations, a number of them come from the North Africa. I mean, Algeria, Egypt, Tunisia, Morocco. Why can't we set out on that agenda so we can bring development and events into our country? The orientation must change so that the teacher will not. I mean, these days, the teacher will call you and say that without understanding what sports can bring. People have completed the university and they are jobless. If you go to America after high school or college, you go pro and you do sports.
In fact, most of the colleges have sponsorship packages by way of scholarships for students with sporting talent. You know, it's very commonplace there. And a lot of them who make it to the pro level go through that system. Unfortunately, we have scholarship programs here and we give to family and friends. I mean,
I'm sorry, but I'm being blunt. We have quality scholarship programs. We give to family and friends. People travel abroad and they don't come again. How much of that scholarship programs can we give to sports? The trainable athletes, so we can take them to Europe and America for them to go and become future champions for Ghana. It is important that we get a change. We need a strategy. People have come and gone. We talk about strategy, we talk about policy document, but what is the implementation plan? Who is taking that action? Do we understand what we are doing? But what is important is that we must get the whole Ghana to understand that sports, if you do sports, it's just like being a medical doctor. Because the athletes are richer than the doctors. It's a fact. The athletes are richer than the lawyers. It's a fact. Let's have that orientation so that when you go to school or when you complete and it doesn't work and you have some sports talent, you can take up to that.
Thanks for those initial comments. You've got me thinking about a whole range of issues. But let me bring in my colleague Muftau Nabila Abdullahi, who joins us via the phone lines. Muftau, I hope the connection is better. Happy New Year to you. Hello, Muftau.
Me Happy New Year.
Anyway, it's the first time. I was going to say when you joined the Zoom connection earlier that it was the first time I was seeing you, and that didn't pan out. But we've started the conversation already on sports and how we fared in 2020. What, in a few minutes, would be your assessment of Ghana and how we fared in the sporting area in 2022? I'm talking about football. We went to the World Cup. At least we got a win over South Korea. I'm talking about athletics. We're in Tokyo. We had the other leagues that we competed in. And we can also get into the bit about that unfortunate, I'll get there, incident where we were disqualified simply because it wasn't mentioned that one of our athletes was going to be replaced. How did we fare last year?
On a whole, I would give the success story of sports for 2022 at 60%.
60%? 60%
because I think that most of the sporting federations were able to up their game. For example, you spoke about Ghana's participation in the athletics competitions. For instance, the World Athletics Championships, the quartet made it to the final. About 14 athletes were taken to the Commonwealth Games. About 13 of them made it to the grand finale. We had 2 of them competing in the final of the long jump. That is Abigail Kwatin and then Rosie Eboa. They made it to the grand finale. Then that was the high jump, rather. Then the long jump, there was Deborah Aqua, who also made it to the final and won the medal. Benjamin Akakpo was in the final as well. There was Joseph Amoah, who became the first Ghanaian athlete in the 200 meters to win a medal for the country since 1974. So on that score, I think that the athletics team did a very good job. We cannot forget about the fact that the quartet that was considered one of the favorites to win the final of the 4x100 competition got disqualified because of a technical issue where they didn't communicate to the organizers of the competition that they were going to make changes to how the team was going to set up. But you would also need to give some credit to the Ghana Athletics Association because the disqualification of the team could have affected the technical team. However, you would notice that the technical team, they were still able to see through these boys and girls to be able to win some medals. So on that score, I would say that it was a success for the Athletics Association. Then you come to boxing. In the boxing arena, we went to the Commonwealth Games again. How many medals did we come back with? 3 medals. That's a very good number in terms of the boxing discipline. We've all seen the rise of Samuel Teshi since he participated in the Tokyo Olympics in 2021. He's been on a certain trajectory. We just need to continue to be committed to his rise as a boxer. Though he's gone pro, we cannot say that because he's gone pro, the success he will bring to this country is not going to be the success of Ghana. The likes of Richard Comey, Isaac Dugbe, they've all been doing some great things. Then you come to football. Football also, I think, was incredible in as much as we had our expectations in terms of what we wanted our national teams to be able to do, not just the Black Stars, because the national teams are about 8 of them. The Black Stars had a very poor start in 2022 when they exited the African Cup of Nations without a single win. But they were able to recover to qualify for the World Cup 2 months later. And they did it against no opposition than Nigeria, a team that had, per many people, had more individual quality than the Black Stars, considering the fact that they were one of the best teams in the African Cup of Nations, though they also exited at the round of 16 stage of the competition. But qualifying for the World Cup alone is a success for me. The only unfortunate area for me in terms of football would be the failure of the Black Queens to qualify for the African Women's Cup of Nations, the failure of the Black Princesses, the failure of the Black Maidens. All these teams were not successful in their attempts to qualify for major competitions. But one thing that the FA would tell you is that it's a gradual process. Though I sometimes disagree with them because of their haphazard way of changing the technical direction of all the national teams. They appear to be recycling the appointment of technical heads for the various national teams. If you want to succeed, there must be a certain consistency. But I do think that the sporting federations were able to pull their weight. And I think that if we are able to have a proper plan, a proper sports policy, a proper structure for the governance of sports in the country, we'll be doing some great things. I didn't even talk about hockey. I didn't even talk about table tennis, and then lawn tennis.
And those are areas, Muftau, where in recent years our returns have been few and far between. I remember the former president, may his soul rest in peace, Evans Atta Mills's passion for hockey. We set up, is it the Theodora Oko?
Yeah, hockey pitch, yeah.
Hockey pitch and all of that. In times gone by, we were really good on the continent when it came to hockey. In ping pong, at a point in time, we were rubbing shoulders with the Egyptians, with the Nigerians, which are some of the biggest teams. As for basketball, it's not exactly gone down that road. Maybe hockey hasn't gone down by that much. But when you look at some of these disciplines over the years, would you say we've been able to hold the standards or maintain the standards that we had before?
I think we've rather declined over the years instead of growing. Because just like you cited the example of the hockey team, if about 7, 8, 9 years ago, or even, let's say, some 10, 11, 12 years ago, we were able to rub shoulders with the likes of Egypt, with the likes of Algeria, Morocco, because these are the teams.
South Africa.
These are some of the strongest teams when it comes to the African continent. And I have covered loads of hockey competitions at the hockey pitch. And most of the times you watch a Ghanaian team coming up against an Egyptian team, and in the end, it is a mismatch. Why have we not developed that much? Is there something we are doing that others are doing better? If others are doing better, then let's look for the best possible ways that we can learn from these countries and also improve our sport. So, for instance, just 7 years ago, you had the Comoros Football Federation engaging the Ghana Football Association to help them in their football development and structure. And 7 years down the lane, this Comoros team caught us at the African Cup of Nations and beat us. So what have we not done right over the years in terms of how we want to be able to compete in the African continent and also in the world. There are certain things I personally believe that we've not been deliberate about. One of them is that we are not deliberate in terms of our investment in sport. So, for instance, you have sporting federations submit budgets to, say, the National Sports Authority or to the Ministry of Youth and Sport. These federations are not even able to prepare themselves for the competition. But within a month or two, we expect them to be able to raise a team that would go out there and compete and win honors for the country. It is not done that way. If you are determined to invest in sports, then you should be determined to release the resources to ensure that the sporting federations are able to groom talent. Let me just cite a quick example. I recall, because I've covered many athletics championships across the country, from Tamale to Takrade to Secondary to Cape Coast to Kumasi. Because the Ghana Athletics Association had a competition called Ghana Athletics Association Championship. It was organized 4 times every year from Tamale, Secondary, Kumasi, Accra. This was a plan put together by the Professor Francis Dodo administration to ensure that they had a plan for local athletes to be able to develop. Because most of these athletes, when their season ends, there's nothing for them to do. And an athlete even failing to train for a week, it can affect the performance of the athlete. I also do recall that this Ghana Athletics Association also had a plan where they camped athletes for 6 months. And if you're going to camp athletes for 6 months, it's going to cost you lots of money. So if you do not have the resources to be able to develop athletes, then you're never going to go out there and come up against a Ferdinand Omanyala, and come out against a Marcel Jokov, and come up against a Fred Kelly, and come up against Eric Knighton, expecting yourself to be able to win. There should be a certain plan in terms of how we want to win. And if that plan does not exist, Benjamin would always struggle.
So looking at the points that you've enumerated, it appears 2022, like you say, you would score us 60% in terms of our performance overall, but there are so many gray areas that we ought to be looking at, from table tennis, as you have mentioned, to rugby, as Mr. Sibe has mentioned, to hockey and all of that. And of course, as we spread our wings and engage in these, that would also mean a bigger medal haul when we go out there, when we're participating in the Olympics, in the Commonwealth Games, and in the All Africa Games and others. But then again, on the back of the same point that you have made, I cannot help, even as you speak about sponsorship and resources, to contemplate 2013, when Ignatius Geza, for example, is it long jump or triple jump hero, left us. There was another lady whose name I've forgotten, who also left us. Many of our athletes have jumped ship, bailed out on us because of these self-same issues. How bad is that issue, that problem? I'll put it to Osei, but I want to find out from you first, as a sporting analyst. What do you see in that area, Muftau?
Ben, one of the things that we are often made to understand is that there should be a certain rapport with these athletes.
Okay.
If you have a rapport with an athlete, in fact, even if you procrastinate your support for the athlete would continue to listen. But there comes a point where every individual gets it to the limit. And if you get to the limit, I'm not sure you'll be willing to cross that limit.
Maybe in 2014, our footballers got to their limit, and that's why we had to fly money to Brazil.
Well, it was quite an interesting story, because the 2014 one was quite dramatic, because they kept getting promises, it would come today, it would come tomorrow, it would come over tomorrow, and it never came. So yeah, indeed they got to their limit. That's why they decided to go on that tangent. But I think that have we built a certain relationship with athletes to the extent that even when we disappoint these athletes, they feel that they are still being recognized by the country. So I was in Oregon with the athletes. And in fact, I've got loads of relationship with many athletes because that's a key thing. If you don't have a relationship with any athlete, it's going to be very difficult for you to be able to get your job done. Most of these athletes often feel that they do not get the support that they need to be able to succeed. That is why when they are done with school, I remember having a conversation with one athlete who was telling me that, Muftao, if I graduate from school right now, I do not have anything to do. So what I'm going to do now is to be able to work. And I cannot combine work and training. If you cannot combine work and training, how do you think that athlete would be in a better shape to be able to compete and do well for you and I, who always want these athletes to go out there and win? And we are the very people who would say
and in
that,
the meantime, Muftao, just to add, in the meantime, their compatriots in other countries are training full-time. You expect part-time, training to give you the results that full-time training with all the equipment, with all the incentivization, with all the motivation will get. Obviously not.
And even one athlete said that, I remember during the Commonwealth Games when the team had a very poor start, one athlete, Abigail Poatin, said, if you have not invested in an area, don't expect medal. Because we have not invested in these athletes to expect medals from them. A local athlete, Rose Yeboah, a student of the University of Cape Coast, for instance, at the Africa World Athletics Championship, she won gold. She's a local athlete. She did a jump of 1.81 meters, if my memory serves me right. In the Commonwealth Games, she did 1.79. This is a local athlete, very young girl. I've known this girl since 2018. If we are able to invest in this athlete, the first international exposure she had, she was winning gold for us, which was the Africa Games 2019 that happened in Morocco, Rabat. Benjamin, if you have athletes of this potential and the athlete gives her all, but in the end, what is required of you and I to be able to let these athletes succeed, we don't bring it. And they'll get to the point where they feel that it is not worth it. Sacrificing myself to compete and run on the flag of Ghana and play football as a Ghanaian ambassador. That is why you would have players get to some point and say that I'm going to retire from the national team. We have one right now. That Fiorentina midfielder, Alfred Duncan, he told us he's not going to play in the national team again. We've heard many stories about certain players who have said they're not going to play in the national team again. We started the example of Ignacio Geza, saying that he was going to switch nationality, was it to the Netherlands?
To the Netherlands. To the Netherlands.
Yes, so we must appreciate these athletes and give them the support they need. Trust me, I'm not one who would say that we should always rely on government to be able to support these athletes to succeed.
Right.
But if government also makes a promise, say, go and do ABC and come back and we'll give you $2,000 or $5,000, and the athletes come back and they will have to chase for their money. If you know you didn't have the money, you should have made a promise in the first place. Because there are many athletes who are still pained that they competed for the country. What was due them was never given to them. We can talk about even the Black Queen winning the Africa Games 2015.
And I was even going to
story.
I was even going to mention that it's not just in Ghana, because sometimes even on the continent, I recall the very first championship for women's teams, clubs, where the Hazakis ladies went, and you remember that issue as well. They were promised some money, The money never came. And then I think Hazaka's ladies took it up, and now it's being made to seem as though. But and that is what part of why I feel sports is not progressing, because even when at the continental level some promises are made, they are not fulfilled. But hold for me, Muftau, some of the points you've made are crucial, and I want to run them by Mr. Esibe, Vice President of the Ghana Athletics Association, and then President in Ghana and Africa of the Arm Wrestling Federation. Mr. Esibe, I want to find out from you. So what then is the state of funding of athletics in Ghana compared to football, compared to other disciplines? Let's focus on that. And Muftau made the point about building a rapport with some of these athletes. What is the rapport like? Because, again, I call to mind that Ignatius Geza at the time, I am sure he's the one, either he or someone else, mentioned that when he got injured, no one from our grouping, our association, reached out to him. He was left literally on his own to find his way of feeding, to find his way of recovering. And you know how expensive those can be if you require surgery and all of that. What is the state of the athletics in terms of funding and in terms of how you relate to these athletes?
I think it's interesting the way Sal rated his relationship with athletics, and I'm happy. He would recall and he would attest that the current leadership of athletics, I mean, it started from Professor Francis Dodu, really do have a relationship, solid one, of course, with the athletes. But for the current leadership, a number of the athletes would have taken a decision to go compete for other countries. It's not been easy managing them. You know, when you don't have resources, you look like a lying father. When they come to you with their concerns, you need to continue engaging them. While you try to pull resources either from partners or from government. So it's not been easy, but I can confirm that we do have a great relationship with the athletes of today. Even the ones who are coming up from the GUSA level, we have a solid relationship with them. And it plays a major role. Sometimes when the athletes have gotten to that crucial moment where they have to take that decision, they look at the relationship they have with you, and then maybe take a step back. So relationship is key, and I can confirm that we do have that with them.
How difficult is it, though? You've spoken about part of the relationship issue. How difficult is it sustaining it? Because look at Benjamin Azamati. I know he runs somewhere in the United States. He used the educational system, and he's using the resources in another country to deliver for us. It's very easy for such a country. Well, the United States doesn't have any shortage of athletic talent. But elsewhere, it would have been very easy to let such people run or compete for other countries. So how are you able to do it? How do you sustain it?
Joe Paul Amwa, for instance, completed school, just like Abigail Kwati. And, they were doing so well because they were using the school's facilities. Now they have completed. What it means is that they have to get their own accommodation. They have to be paying their professional coach. They have to be buying their own vitamins. They have to pay for training facilities and all that. So if, as a nation, we do not help them, then it becomes difficult. It opens doors for people to lure them into competing for them. So it is either for the athlete to go pro and look for money, or when they are lured by other countries, they move. It is why we feel that, look, if we're going to spend just about 3,000 to 5,000 on our prospect athletes over a period of time, so we have France ahead of us, how are we even preparing to make sure that we're able to put this team together for France? We have Africa Games 2023. What are we doing to put this team together? So it is not just about the Athletics Association. Yes, we have engaged partners. We continue to engage people to support us in taking care of these athletes. The little support we get from World Athletics and occasional from the GOC, it cannot sustain the way we want to manage these athletes. Muftau mentioned Rose Animaya Boa, Amoni Maya Boa, who studies at the UCC. Won't it be prudent by now for us to get some quality facility for her to train either here or take her outside? Man, it has not been easy. Normally, it gets to a point where, the continuous engagement doesn't work anymore. And they are lured with solid packages. If you go behind the scenes and you check what people lure them with, you realize that you can't even match it. But they don't need gold from us. They need just that little support. Just that little support.
So you're basically saying, Mr. Sibe, that it's not that the patriotism of these athletes is in question, no. But sometimes we disappoint them for so long, and others come through with mouth-watering packages. And why non-padepa? So they fall for them. Right, but then that brings me to the question. I posed it earlier. You've still not addressed it. What then is the state of the coffers of the Ghana Athletics Association, and what are your expectations from the state, from government?
Well, if I was to be an employee, then I'll say it's hand to mouth. The little annual grant we get from the World Athletics, normally they will bring you the grant and say it is either for a specific training or program. So we're unable to say. Now, what we also do is that if we want to prepare one or two athletes for special programs, we'll write to World Athletics and say that, look, we want to train coaches. And then they'll bring you about $3,000 or $4,000. If you have an athlete somewhere that you need special support, then you can engage World Athletics. Apart from that, what they do is that for the major World Athletics events, they will take care of your travel ticket and all that. So Ghana Athletics as a federation, we continue to package our products and brand. We have engaged a number of institutions to believe in the product we have. We have an empty coffers. We have often fallen on the Ministry of Youth and Sports for support, but you and I know that they support a number of federations, over 48 of them. So you can't always get what you want. Last year, for instance, they supported us for the World Relay. There were other programs we wanted to, take part in. Unfortunately, we couldn't. Now, let me cite, you asked an earlier question, and I'll cite an example of Nigeria before I answer that question. Toby, there's a lady in Nigeria.
Toby Amusan.
Thank you. Toby, it was a company in Nigeria.
Is it the recent one who won a gold medal or something?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
She's a triple chase runner.
Right.
Headler.
So it was a company in Nigeria that decided to invest in her training. So she moved to the States, and the company was responsible for her training. $20,000 every month.
Wow.
How much is $20,000 for the top companies in this country? I mean, how much is $20,000 for government?
So that's a challenge we can throw as well to corporate Ghana.
Look, Ben, our athletes don't need $20,000. If indeed we want to plan for France or Africa Games, I have said this and I'll say it again. Let's get the Ghana embassy in the US. Find these athletes an apartment, quality one, being paid by Ghana government. And then give them some small support stipends. So they work small. They work, let's say, 15 hours a week. They train, eat, and sleep. So they are not bothered by accommodation, how to pay bills and stuff. The Ghana embassy, we all know, Ben, you know, and I know, that the best thing Ghana has today is not even the Black Stars. What we have is the relay team. And if indeed we have Africa Games coming, if indeed we have France coming, this is the time we must invest nothing less than $200,000 in our guys, and they will bring us that result. You asked why sports or the other sporting disciplines are declining. Look, fact is that days when we were winning so much, there were fewer countries playing sports. And that is fact. It's a fact. The second point, too, is that those who have begun to play sports have done things differently and scientifically. We have not. The third point, I think Muftal tried addressing it. In the past, federations will send their budgets to the NSA through the ministry, and then it goes to government. Then the major thing I remember happened was national championships for almost every federation, and it was being sponsored by government. Now, if you want to travel for West Africa Championship, Africa Championship, or whatever, that little support will start coming from government. But between 2005, or let's say 4, till today, when we decided to invest every money into the Black Stars, the federations began suffering. It is why you can't even see quality and well-hyped tennis national championship, athletics national championship, a quality boxing event where all our boxers will come together, we select the best players to represent our nation. Even football, anytime we're going to put the Black Stars team together, we'll play northern and southern sector games. And then out of that, we select our team. There is no quality selection criteria. A number of the sporting disciplines today, apart from athletics, football, and arm wrestling, are academies.
And especially as you talk about a selection criteria, I cannot help but bring in the bit about football teams and others. I think basically in boxing and the rest it's not so prominent. But when it comes to football especially, and I'll address this question to both you and Muftal very briefly. Are we getting the selections right? Because it appears there's a whole lot of cronyism, nepotism, even politics at play. What exactly is going on? What do you know that you can share with us? Briefly, a minute each, and we'll move on to other subjects. Mr. Sibe?
Well, you want to talk about selection. You know, I'm a leader, and sometimes I am careful the way I speak about this thing. But I feel that if we want to do quality selection, we must get the best to represent the country. If the best is in Wale Wale, let's go there and get the best. You know, earlier I talked about comparative advantage. So in Ghana, for instance, if you want to get quality boxers, go to the north or Bono. If you want to get quality hockey players, you go to Central and Accra. You don't even go to Ashanti. If you want to get quality swimmers, you get them from here. Football is nationwide. And you and I know that the Northerners play quality football. The people south here play quality football. So we must have a selection criteria. Sometimes it is not just about numbers or representation. It's about quality. So if the chunk of the quality will come from one zone, we must allow it. But also remember, in selecting teams, a number of things come to play. Discipline, interest, and all. So I'm very careful talking about selection. But what is important is that any athlete we select to represent the country should be ready to bring that quality results we require or desire.
Okay. Muftal, quickly on selections.
Just like Charles mentioned, it's quite a delicate thing because quality is relative. What you see as quality would be different to another person. But it is critical that you assemble the best of athletes. When I say athletes, I mean the entire sporting space. Be it, if you're a footballer, you're an athlete. If you're a runner, you're an athlete. If you're a hockey player, you're an athlete. So I'm just using the word athlete to generalize. It is important that you assemble the best of athletes, in your opinion, would do well for you. So, for instance, say we are assembling the best under-17 national team to represent Ghana in the upcoming, say, under-17 West Africa Championship. And we decide that we want players from all the clubs that are in Ghana. So each club should send us their best player. So the club decides to select which player they think is the best within their team. All of them to assemble at Pram and compete for the technical team to make a decision. Trust me, there's a player, in your opinion, Ben, is so skillful, but the coach is not looking out for a skillful player. The coach is looking out for a player who provides him certain results. He might not have the skill, but he's a clinical finisher. Meanwhile, you also think this guy is so skillful to the extent that he should be given an opportunity to play. So sometimes when we get to this point, I always think that those who have been tasked to lead our national team, they should have the responsibility of assembling the best possible athletes that we've got in the country. But let's not forget that these people cannot do it alone.
Right. I think sometimes...
That's why it is always important that people recommend. And trust me, Kwesi Appiah recently mentioned that when he called up Mohamed Kudus to come to the national team, people had issues because he was assembling young players. We all know Kwesi Appiah has got an eye for young talent because he's brought out the likes of Christian Achu, Ajapon, then there's Mohamed Kudus, Gideon Mensah. All these players were brought to the national team by Kwesi Appiah.
Right.
If Kwesi Appiah has an eye for sporting talent, then Kwesi Appiah should be considered someone who will scout talents for us. So instead of us asking the team, oh, you bring us your best players, the GFA can decide that we want Kwesi Appiah to go around the country and assemble talents for us.
And that's a very important point you make, something that we could avert our attention to, even as he has expressed interest in taking on the Black Stars once more, if given the opportunity. As we conclude the conversation in the next few minutes with your final thoughts, I'd just like to find out, even as you reflect on what you would like to see in 2023, there are a few interesting things for me. Mr. Sibe says, the best thing Ghana has today is the relay team, 4x100. Do you agree, Muftau? You agree, okay. And then we're also looking at the performance of our Chan team in Egypt, where they were beating Al Ali and, others. And then going back to the bit about boxing very briefly. The Cubans have started training their women. In the past, they've not done that. They're doing that and they're going hard. Until recently, they were the country with the highest medal haul in that category for men, I think, in the Olympics. I saw what you put together with, is it Najat, the 11-year-old boxing phenom?
Najat Loko.
What is your reflection on these and how can we do better in 2023? And that is for both of you in some 2 minutes, please.
Ben, 2023, I am not sure we are a country that often learn lessons from our failures. If we are, then this conversation wouldn't happen in the first place. Because, trust me, I think these conversations are becoming a bit mundane.
Right.
Simply because we know the failures, but we do not provide a solution. We know that we need to invest in talent. We need to go out there and unearth talent. But we are seated in the comfort of our home and only get up to assemble athletes to go and represent us. It is not going to happen. We know that we need to camp athletes for, say, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. But there is this hymn that we all think, there's no money. And the no money syndrome is not going to go away from the sporting space anytime soon. Like I mentioned, I am not one who would always say that government should take care of everything. Government cannot do it alone. And in fact, the budget that is often given to the Ministry of Youth and Sport, that money is so small to the extent that, like Charles mentioned, if you have like 43 or 48 different sporting federations, and you have the Ghana Football Association alone coming in to take a chunk of that money, then what would the other federations do? I think that there should be a certain responsibility on corporate institutions. And this brings me to the point Charles mentioned about Toby and Musan. In fact, I had a privilege of speaking to Toby when I met her in the World Athletics Championship. And I've spoken to other journalists too, because in that World Athletics Championship, the Nigerian athletes were so good. It was not just Toby. Toby was the headliner because she broke a world record and set a world record. That's why she became the headliner. But there were other young athletes within the Nigerian setup who were doing so well. Guess what? The Nigerian sports ministry set up a committee. This committee was staffed to put together a report of which sporting areas that government should be ready to invest in, right? When the committee came out with their report, they ensured that they got corporate institutions in the country to take up the responsibility of at least one athlete.
Right, so that feeds into what Mr. Sibe was saying.
A corporate institution in Ghana decides that we are going to take up roads. So in the next 5 years, we want to invest in roads because we have a certain target for her.
Right.
In the next 5 years, if Rose is winning gold for us at the World Athletics Championship, we have achieved our goal.
Right.
But if we are not able to even get the corporate institutions to come on board and support us, and we always want to rely on government to do it, government will always tell us there's no money. So this is the point where the sporting federations themselves would need to go out there. The government, which is the Ministry of Youth and Sports, can, and in fact, the ministry has done it. KGL, this sponsorship was brought to the Ghana Football Association by the ministry.
Right.
Bet Power was brought to the Ghana Football Association by the ministry. MTN came in as a sponsor of the Black Stars for the World Cup by the government. So if the government can get these corporate institutions to support football, why can't they do the same for other federations?
Muftau, we'll have to sew it up here. Thank you so much for your thoughts, Muftau Nabila Abdullahi, my colleague with Joy Sports. Mr. Sibe, your final thoughts.
Well, proposal for 2023, one has been, tabled by Muftau. Corporate institutions taking up athletes, not just athletics, but athletes in general. The other thing, you and I know, do you have an idea how much is invested in football tournament for Black Stars? I'm sure you do. So my proposal, and you can challenge me to this, all the top federations put together, government must find $3 million only. It's just about 1/3 or a quarter of how much is invested in a tournament for Black Stars. Government should find $3 million for our top federations. Let's find a fund manager to manage these funds. Let's get the top federations to bring their program of activities, both development and competitions. And I bet you, if the federations get that $3 million, managed by a funds manager, together with the programs from the federations, between now and France 2024 Olympics, you and I will see the results Ghana will bring. Only $3 million for the top federations, not one federation. And let's find a fund manager to check the programs of these federations, both development and competition. And we will get that result by the end of 2024.
Thank you, Charles Osei Sibe, for joining the conversation. We're grateful. And he is Vice President, Ghana Athletics Association, and President of the Ghana and Africa Arm Wrestling Federations. He joined us together with Muftau for the conversation. Before we take a break and return and tell you about Esports Africa Week, water is life. It regulates your body temperature, keeps you alive and kicking. Awake is premium purified water treated through a strict purification process to ensure that every bottle on the market refreshes you better. And guess what? We have the perfect sizes for all occasions, 330 and 500 ml bottles to fit your pockets and bags, 750 ml for the heavy drinkers, 1.5 liters for those who always want more. And we have also introduced our special 19-liter jars for offices and homes Now, all you need to do is just stay awake with Awake Purified Drinking Water wherever you go. So come on, grab a bottle of Awake and get quality hydration. Awake Purified Drinking Water, one for life. Remember, for every bottle you purchase, an amount is donated to the National Cardiothoracic Center, and that is indeed heartwarming. It's produced by Casa Preco. For bulk purchases. Just call 0262 351 251. We take a break and return with more excitement on the AM show. Stay.